Welcome back, fellow gamers. I was asked in a previous video to build a budget tribal Doran the Siege Tower deck. Now, while I mainly do deck techs that aren't budget restricted or anti-deck techs that pretty much just buck the norm, I figured I would give this a shot. So, as always, if you have any commander-specific requests for deck techs or anti-deck techs, let her rip in the comments below. One thing, though, that I would like to mention about deck techs, I usually build my decks with less focus. I like to have a deck that can play a bunch of different metas rather than dominate certain decks but lose to others. Being in the game and having fun is what's important to me, so I usually loosen the noose and go with a Swiss Army knife approach, so I don't really go buck wild. Okay, let's dive in. The first thing that I will say is this: budget deck techs usually try to save cash where possible. The easiest way to run up a tab in any Magic the Gathering deck is to go balls out on lands. But using basic lands or stuff like Guile Gates instead of shock lands, fetches, or even duels will help you save money. I would still recommend you getting those types of cards because they'll be able to be put into a bunch of different decks. On another note, I'm not going to put a cap on card values. I'm not going to be monitoring the deck price because prices are in constant flux, and whatever the price I slap up on the screen could become obsolete in a matter of days or weeks or who knows how long. But do note that I am choosing cards that I feel give the most bang for your buck while trying to keep costs down. So that means choosing cards like Utter End or Vindicate kind of, is the way that I'll be going. So with that out of the way, I'd like to make sure that I like to use Doran as a beatdown deck. Casting cards that have a high toughness, usually with a low power, that means that the cards are generally cheaper, both in price and in mana cost. A great example of this is Treefork Harbinger. 1 mana for a 3 attacker when Doran's out. That you get to search your library is definitely, the definition of value for me, especially in this deck. Since Treefork Harbinger can look for other Treefolks, and we're building a tribal Treefolk deck, let's look at other Treefolks to put in this deck. Seed Guide Ashley, Sapling Conifer, Unstoppable Ash, Boss Banneret, Ulenwald Observer, Deadwood Treefolk, Orchard Warden, Magnagoth Treefolk, Black Poplar Shaman, Woodfall Primus, Wickerboro Elder, Everbark Shaman, Battlewan Oak, Tooththorn Witch, Indomitable Ancients. They all fit into that tribal theme that we're trying to play off of. Fen Deep Summoner is a great card to bolster that number of Treefolks that you control. Timber Protector is an expensive card, but I think it's actually worth putting into your deck as it gives you tribal creatures +1/+1. It also gives them indestructible, but honestly, it's whether or not you can afford it. I know this is supposed to be budget, so I'm kind of just throwing that one out there. Same goes for like Heartwood Storyteller. The prices are fairly expensive. Now, generally for tribal builds, I don't like to include too many off-tribe creatures, but Doran's ability makes it too hard to pass up on some cards. Ikra Shidiki, I mispronounced that name, is great if you want to gain life from those creatures with high toughness that you'll be able to be playing. But she'll also swing in for 7 damage when Doran is out on the field. Then you have the Tree of Redemption and Tree of Perdition. At 13 toughness, yeah, I'm going to be including these in the build. Their abilities can be gangbuster. Now, yes, they have Defender. I'll get to that in a minute. You are going to have quite a few creatures with low power, so Sidar Kondo of Jamura's ability quite well with that aggro strategy. I like to bolster my creature's toughness, so Oathsworn Giant doing that and giving my creatures vigilance is great. The 6 mana is a bit rough for the effect, but I still believe it's worth it. Skin Shifter is a card I cut more times than not when I build a Doran deck, but since this is a budget deck, and I'll be excluding some of the high value cards that I get, he'll get that spot that I normally reserve for those other cards. Next, let's build a wall. Probably the best wall you've ever seen. Wall of Blossoms, Wall of Omens, Wall of Tanglecord, Wall of Nets, Wall of Bone, Wall of Faith, and Wall of Reverence are pretty awesome. Also throw in Overgrown Battlement to generate mana from all those glorious walls. Now, you might be saying, but Jay, you can attack with these. These are all defenders. You are right. Because I am crazy like that, let's go ahead and add in some non-wall defenders. Let's just add in more defenders. You just complained, but we're adding more. Stalwart, Shield Bearers, help boost those defenders. Soul of the Faultless for life gain and drain. Axebane Guardian to produce extra mana. And okay, now insert Wakestone Gargoyle so that we can use the ability to have our defenders attack. One card isn't enough, so since we are on the subject, throw in Rolling Stones and throw in Assault Formation. It helps with allowing creatures with defender to attack, but if you have mana to spare, you can use it to bolster your creatures' numbers. Finally, we'll wrap up the creature section of the deck with some creatures that have a high toughness and provide some other benefit. Silklash Spider helps against flyers. That's a pretty good one. Trostani gives you life gain while helping populate if you have any of those aforementioned Treefolk tokens. Dragonlord Dromoka helps control when your opponents cast spells, but also gives you a decent bodied flyer. Pontiff of the Blight allows you to start draining life points while bolstering your own life count. Continue that life gain train with Janet Lifestrider. Combine all these incremental life gains with Rock's Faith Menderer, and you are good to go. Although you might want to check on the prices of these cards, as who knows. All right, that's 45 creatures, a little heavy creature-wise, but that is okay. We are going for a beatdown strategy, so ensuring you have a board presence needed to win is crucial. Let's get to the mana fixing out of the way. Sol Ring, the Golgari, Orzhov, and Celestia Signets are the ones you want. If you have access to a Thran Dynamo, that could work too, but that's depend on the price. It might be a bit out of the budget. I've also left Swiftfoot Boots out until now, so let's throw that in. The deck is critical on Doran's ability, so we want to get him protected. And we don't want to forget about Lightning Greaves, Ellen Umbra, Shield of Oversoul, and Heroic Intervention. Those are all great at protecting your general. But what about the other side? Let's look at removal options. I mentioned Utter End, Retribution of the Meek, Fell the Mighty, and Wave of Reckoning fit in perfectly as they are unlikely to touch much of your board state while doing severe removal to the other side. Now, Retribution of the Meek can be pricey, but cards in less than near mint condition can be found at rock bottom prices, so consider that. I also like to throw in Oblivion Ring into pretty much all my white decks because it's a good card. No reason not to include it here. It can be found for pennies. You'll want to try to get some card advantage, so Life Crafter's Bestiary and Phyrexian Arena are really good cards to consider. Phyrexian Arena dropped in price recently, which is great. A lot of the tutors are expensive, but you can get Diabolical Tutor for under a quarter if you don't already own a dozen copies, right? So that's 63 non-land cards. I like to about have 37 land as a baseline in all of my decks, going up or down depending on the mana curve, but for this deck, let's keep it at 37. It's nice and easy, and I think it fits. So the lands. Let's start with Sand Step, Citadel, Command Tower, Sunpetal Grove, Golgari Rot Farm, Celestia Sanctuary, Orzhov Basilica. You'll want the Guile Gates as replacements for the Shocklands that I mentioned a bit earlier, but again, invest in Shocks. You'll want Crozen Verge, Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, Grasslands, Murad Landscape, Rocky Tar Pit are the honorable replacements for the expensive fetch lands. Again, if you can get them, that's great. The Vivid Cycle works quite well to get you out of a pinch every now and then. The coming in tapped kind of sucks, but hey, that's all right. From here, you can add a few utility lands like Bojuka Bog, Forbidding Watchtower, and the Vault of the Archangel. If you have access to other cards that can give you options to produce different colors, slot those in. Since cards like Shambling Vent, Concealed Courtyard are from recent sense, you might have a few lying around. If not, I would say, keeping in theme with the budget deck, just fill out the rest with basic lands. Remember to adjust the mana ratios for any cards that you might have substituted along the way. That's very important because, you're not going to 100% stick to my deck tech. That's fine. So there you have it, a somewhat budget Doran deck for Commander. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I know I left a lot of the other cards off the list, but what would you take out and slot in instead? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear it. In the meantime, if you'd like to check out some of my other deck techs, you can do that right there. And if you'd like to subscribe, you can hit that button right there. It's really appreciated. Thanks for making me a part of your day. And until next time, good gaming.